I'm Praveen Haridas, a lead healthcare and life science industry vertical for AWS Data Exchange. Before we start, can you please raise your hand if you or your team is aware of AWS Data Exchange? Okay, thank you. Can you please raise your hand if you or your team is actually using Data Exchange in a production or in a pilot setting? Okay, so good, a mix of new users and matured users, so thank you, that's great. So this will be a great session for you to get acclimated on what AWS Data Exchange, or ADX as we call it, and how leading life science enterprises like Moderna and Takeda are using it. We launched AWS Data Exchange to solve challenges with our customers, such as pharma, to find, subscribe, and access data from data partners. Since we launched the service in November 2019, we have added 300 plus data providers and 3,500 plus public data sets covering financial services, healthcare and life sciences, retail, location, and ESG, if you will. We have expanded our data delivery methods based on what we heard from our customers and data partners. We started with the file-based data delivery in 2019. We expanded to Redshift and API in 2021, and we have also added a couple of new features in 2022. AWS Data Exchange make it easier to use external data because it is natively integrated to different AWS services. Customers can ingest third-party data files directly into their S3, letting them to prepare and analyze it using data integration, data analytics, AI, ML tools of their choice. Customers also can use data delivery via Amazon Redshift tables, letting providers handle the work needed to cleanse, validate, transform the data into production-ready tables so that the customers or subscribers can start querying, analyzing, and integrating the data set directly into a production system as soon as they subscribe. Customers can also ask for data delivery via APIs, letting their developers to start integrating the data into production applications wherever it is built. There's no other place where customer can find and license files, tables, and APIs in a single product, and where they can completely automate how they ingest and use the data with whatever tools they prefer. If you are a provider, global distribution of data business through AWS Data Exchange is few clicks away with our easy-to-use API and console experience. Because security has always been AWS' #1 priority, AWS Data Exchange is secure and compliant way of exchange the data. AWS Data Exchange, or ADX, adhere to HIPAA, GDPR, and high trust requirements. All data is encrypted at rest and in transit, and AWS Data Exchange is integrated with AWS Identity and Access Management solution so that the users, you can set up fine-grained controls using IAM policies to monitor who does what. For providers, subscription verification is an optional feature that allows them to understand customer use cases and comply with KYC, or Know Your Customer, regulation before approving access to data products, if they choose to list the data sets publicly. Data Exchange also help in your governance of your third-party subscription. Data Exchange provide one place to exchange data publicly and privately. Today, hundreds of data providers make thousands of different data products available to millions of AWS customers worldwide in our public catalog, or privately to individual customers on their data choosing. Subscribers can browse our public catalog on AWS Marketplace or leverage our AWS Data Exchange Discovery Desk to find out the specific data set you're looking for, and then the data providers can provide the samples or the actual data set publicly or privately, if you will. And it simplifies the subscription and billing management. Customer can migrate existing subscription to AWS Data Exchange at no cost. All new and existing subscriptions appear in AWS Data Exchange console for streamlined management. More than half of the products of AWS Data Exchange use a standard data subscription agreement template, which enable legal team to review that once and then let the business team make faster decisions on the data they need purely based on budget and use cases, not legal terms, if you will. Last but not the least, any fee for commercial data products are consolidated on customers' AWS invoice, saving subscribers from having to set up and manage yet another billing relationship. Providers can also rest assured that they can be paid in a timely fashion through AWS, and AWS also take care of some of the back-end aspect related to global taxations, if you will. For subscribers, all of this means less time spent searching for data, building infrastructure to get into production, and ensuring the data and delivery is compliant with industry regulation. Instead, your engineers, your data scientists, your epidemiologists can focus on generating insights on the data as soon as you license it. For providers or data partners, it means reduced engineering time, effort, and cost, and easier distribution. And by joining AWS Partner Network and co-selling with AWS account teams, provider can reach millions of potential customers and meaningfully grow their revenues. There is no other service as comprehensive as AWS Data Exchange, where you can procure third-party data sets via files, Redshift, and APIs, and in one easy use place. As of today, we are excited to announce that we have launched 2 new features, again based on what we heard from our customers. AWS Data Exchange for Amazon S3. It enables customers to find, subscribe, and use third-party files directly from providers' S3 bucket. Subscribers can start their data analysis with AWS in a few clicks without having to set up their own S3 bucket, copy data files into it, and pay associated storage fees. Because subscribers use the same data as providers, subscribers are immediately using the most up-to-date information. The second one is AWS Data Exchange for AWS Lake Formation. It enables data providers license access to live, ready-to-use structured tables via AWS Lake Formation. And subscribers can immediately query and analyze the data with any Lake Formation-compatible query engines. So what happens when companies have easy access to external or third-party data and put it to work quickly and easily? What does that mean to their business? Let's learn it from Sunil Dravida from Takeda. He's a veteran in healthcare data space and had a lot of experience in healthcare data. Sunil.
Thank you, Praveed. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunil Dravida. I'm the Global Head of the Real World Data Center of Excellence at Takeda Pharmaceuticals. I have over 30 years of experience in data and analytics, and I'm very passionate about improving patient outcomes with the combination of science and technology. I'm the lead author of the book, Real World Evidence in the Pharmaceutical Landscape, which I wrote last year. I wanted to give back something to the community by just taking all my knowledge in real-world data and putting it in something that can be consumed. So the book came out last year, and a lot of people are reading it. So the main tenet of the real-world data COE at Takeda is to make sure we have the right kind of data available at the right time in the right format to all the constituents. So when we talk about real-world evidence, you need data. You need good data at your hands. So I want to make sure I make it very easy for the consumers of data to get the data in the right format and in a timely manner. I want to make it easy for anyone in the company to find the data assets. So the cataloging of the data is extremely important for us, as well as the governance. And I want to empower the teams to make data-driven decisions, right, to support, in bringing the medicines to patients faster. So why did I join Takeda? Takeda is a patient-focused, values-based, R&D-driven global biopharma company that is committed to bringing better health and a brighter future to people worldwide. Our passion and pursuit of potentially life-changing treatments for patients are deeply rooted in our 230 years of distinguished history in Japan. It was founded in 1781 in Osaka, Japan, and is currently headquartered in Tokyo. And our global hub is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We employ over 50,000 employees worldwide. We operate in 80 different countries, and we are a top employer in about 39 of them. We have 40 new molecular clinical stage entity assets, and our fiscal year 21 revenue was $29.4 billion. So we are a top 10 biopharma company. We treat over 20 conditions with our medicines and vaccines. The main therapeutic areas that we operate under are neuroscience, gastroenterology, oncology, rare diseases, plasma-derived therapies, and vaccines. Some of the conditions we treat are like ADHD, major depressive disorder, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, Fabry, multiple myeloma, non-small cell lung cancer, short bowel syndrome, Hunter syndrome, type 1 Gaucher, and dengue. So we recently came up with the dengue vaccine, and we are on an accelerated path with the FDA to get that approved. So that's a huge thing for us. So as you can see on this slide, that is my book. This is no way a plug for my book. I just wanted to let you know that there's a book out there that talks about real-world evidence in the pharma landscape. So what is real-world data? So real-world data is defined as the data relating to patient health status and/or the delivery of healthcare that is routinely collected from a variety of sources. The sources of RWD can be, but they're not limited to, electronic health records, claims and billing activity, product and disease registries, data that's gathered from other sources like wearables and pedometers and smartwatches. Real-world data is extremely important because it's collected outside of your randomized controlled trials, right? In a traditional RCT, as they are called, data is collected in a controlled population. So the findings can be limited by the characteristics of the cohort, right, that is limited in the trial. Additionally, RCTs, take a lot of money and they take time. RWD, on the other hand, can be collected from a number of cohorts or potentially subgroups of populations, right, that are diverse, and the insights gained from such data can be extremely valuable. For example, you're examining the use of a new medication or treatment protocol in special populations in the real-world setting where the patient's behavior, co-occurring treatments, and the environmental factors are not influenced by the controlled setting of an RCT. So it can really provide the powerful insights. In 2016, the FDA actually passed an act called the 21st Century Cures Act in December 2016. So since then, most of the regulatory bodies, including FDA, are actually pushing the use of real-world evidence in your submissions, right? So anywhere from doing label expansions to even going through a regular RCT, they're asking you to corroborate your findings with real-world evidence. So RWD is very critical to accelerate R&D, clinical development, and launching new drugs and therapies. So for example, in R&D, real-world data can be used to identify some of the unmet needs and inform research decisions. You can have innovative clinical trial designs, like you can have synthetic control arms that are just based on data. You can do external control arms purely just on data, especially in rare diseases. You can inform some of the trial design by defining the inclusion-exclusion criteria based on the data. and the endpoints. You can optimize site selection, and you can accelerate patient recruitment. You can accelerate the time to market, refine some of the formularies by determining optimal dosing based on patient response in real settings. And you can monitor the real-world outcomes by quantifying some of the unmet needs and understanding the safety and efficacy profiles. In market access, we can improve the evidence of value by demonstrating the value of the therapy, the economic value of the therapy to the payers. You can compare trial data with real-world evidence to strengthen the dossier, and you can enable some of the outcomes-based pricing. We can also improve the formulary position by achieving better patient access, show efficacy and safety through head-to-head in silico trials. As I mentioned earlier, you can do label expansions by using RWD. So a drug that's already approved in the marketplace, through the usage of drug in a real setting over number of years, you realize that the drug can be actually used for other indications apart from the one it was approved for. So you can file for a label expansion just based on the data. In sales and marketing as well, you can target some of the underdiagnosed patients. You can identify some of the super responders. You can identify patients likely to switch or discontinue a particular therapy. And you can also shape the commercial strategy by shaping the product positioning, understanding the healthcare provider decision making and impact on the outcomes. And you can also understand the influence networks. And you can also provide recommendations at the point of care and based on the predictions of outcomes and the disease progression. In medical affairs, we can improve pharmacovigilance. We can strengthen the evidence of differentiation, and we can monitor some of the unmet needs of the patient at the HCP level and improve adherence. So it's quite a bit, but these are some of the great applications of real-world data across the landscape. And it's not going to be limited to this. We are going to see it more and more being used across the biopharma landscape in the years to come. Now, I talked about real-world data. I talked about real-world evidence. But I need to acquire it. I need to bring it in. And for that, I go through a number of challenges on a regular basis. So, for example, let's say, have an unmet need for a particular disease, and I don't have the data. So the first thing I do is I go and scan the landscape and find maybe 30 vendors that say that they have data for a particular disease. So that's the first thing. I need to understand and then be able to shortlist the vendors that have what we call fit-for-purpose data. Then I need time and I need resources to evaluate the data cohorts and the data sampling that we get from the vendors. And each vendor is going to send you the data in a different format, in a different kind of staging area. It can be S3, it can be SFTP. So you have to understand the nuances of that and be able to deal with the variations, just to try out and try to figure out whether this is good for me, right? Once you're done with that, and let's say you're at last ready to contract, it's a very huge contract, time-intensive process you have to go through. And then you have to work with procurement to set up the billing processes. And then you could have duplicate subscriptions to the same data set across 5 different groups in the company. One group is not talking to the other. So you can have the same data set lying around, and nobody has a clue that this other group has the same data. So we are dealing with, one, having multiple data silos of the same kind of data. 2, we are paying extra for that. We don't have a centralized view of what we have acquired. We cannot catalog the data sets well because everything is nicely spread out across the enterprise, so we don't have any centralized data lake purview on it. And that leads to non-unified data strategy across the organization. Now, once I'm done contracting, I have to go through another process of integration. to bring the data in. I have to go through a huge ETL process because usually these data sets are not standardized. So I have to go through a transformation to bring it into some kind of common data model, whether it's OMOP or variation thereof. And then I have to persist it on something that I can query on, like Redshift. All that takes time, and it basically takes away from the value I can realize from the data in a timely manner. So this is just an example of what we do in a fit-for-purpose data assessment. This is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you an idea as to what we look for. When we are talking to vendors, some of the things we look for are therapeutic area coverage, right? That's the first thing. So for that particular disease, do they have any data? The second thing we look for is demographics, age, race, ethnicity. We also look for the geography, right? So we look for a lot of US and ex-US data. We are a global company. So we scan the landscape to make sure they have ex-US data as well. We look for some of the biomarker endpoints, right? Like liver and spleen volume changes. You also look for clinical endpoints. For example, increased mortality or disease-free survival. These are some of the factors we look for. We also look for procedure information, right? Are they capturing the procedures, in their data? Labs, like for example, glucose, hemoglobin A1C1, A1C levels. We are also now starting to look at diagnostics and genetic tests, right? So next generation sequencing test becomes huge in oncology. And we are looking for the healthcare resource utilization by looking at ER visits. So we want to understand the burden of illness, and we see whether the data is being captured by any of these providers. And we also look for vitals like BMI, temperature information. And last but not least, we want to make sure if I am getting data, let's say claims data from 3 different providers, and each of them has some kind of value for us, we want to make sure we can easily link the data across the data sets, which means we need to be able to tokenize the data. Because for a good comprehensive view of the patient journey, you want a particular patient who has left, let's say, a payer after 2 years and gone to another payer, and we get the de-identified data for those patients from 2 or 3 different data sets. You need to be able to link those across. So we look for the tokenization strategy from the data vendors as well. So after doing all this, we rank them, as you can see, based on whether they have met the data requirements or they have not. So anywhere from 1 through 5. And then we shortlist, and then we see how many patients do they have in their data sets, right? What are some of the data access considerations? Timelines, right? How long does it take for me to fully execute the contracts and then to bring the data on board, right? How streamlined is that process? Can I make it automated if they have, monthly drops? And I look at cost, right? At the end of the day, that's a huge factor, for me. So then this is the process that we go through to kind of get fit-for-purpose data for something that's unmet. This is just a view of what we do. Like anyone, in the audience here, we have a centralized data lake that's built on AWS. And we have an enterprise data backbone where we try to, break the silos and make it more reliable and have good quality data. We want to make it rapid and agile. We want to be able to leverage some of the self-service analysis tools and govern from a centralized viewpoint. Now, I do say this, but I can also say that the time it takes for us to talk to the vendor to the point where we actually onboard the data and are able to analyze the data can take anywhere between 2 and 3 months. Because there is a lot of things, as I said, like for example, it takes us 2 to 3 weeks just to get access to the data and the data sample of data and data dictionaries. And then once we get that, we have to put it somewhere on a data store to be able to analyze it. And then we have to go through the ETL processes and bring it on board. So it could take us anywhere between 2 and 3 months. Which brings us to what we started seeing the benefit of, right, through our partnership with AWS Data Exchange. So we are able to evaluate the data sources on ADX by easily executing a pilot based on our priorities. We are able to streamline procurement, realize the economic benefits, and achieve IT efficiencies. So we are easily able to find the data sets we are looking for a specific use case. We are able to manage and monitor the third-party data providers and what they subscribe. That includes entitlement, the duration, the agreement, and we are able to track that across the enterprise. We are able to centralize the cataloging of first and third-party data sets. So it's easier for us to now find and request and use the data sets. We provide full visibility to the stakeholders who can now directly go and try out the data sets from the vendors. It eliminates the middlemen, and they are able to do it through a unified process. It also provides us the economic incentives because we save resources and money upfront in the discovery and evaluation, as there is no cost to try out AWS Data Exchange. It's free for all AWS customers. We can also consolidate all the invoices into a singular invoice process through AWS. And there are very minimal changes to the procurement because we are able to have this procurement process coexist with our current procurement process. Without ADX, we struggle with the maintenance of multiple software and scripting languages. Now we have the ability to accelerate the integration of the data sets from the data providers directly into the Takeda environment. And we are able to potentially remove complex ETL processes because we know how the data is coming through, and a lot of the nuances of transforming the data is handled now by AWS Data Exchange layer. We are easily able to satisfy Takeda's security and compliance requirements for data sharing because we are already an AWS customer. We reduce some of the IT complexity by transitioning off the infrastructure and providing automation. And the data packages are also being standardized now because everything is flowing through ADX as our first layer. So we are looking forward to continuing this partnership with AWS Data Exchange and streamline our process of finding, evaluating, and acquiring new real-world data sources so we can keep innovating and keep bringing drugs to patients faster. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I would like to invite my friend Carlos.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunil. That's a very informative presentation about real-world data. So my name is Carlos. Super excited to be here. I'm the lead of data engineering for Moderna. My team is in charge of everything data for the company. Everything that we do from data acquisition, data organization, how do you actually model the data and store it in the cloud, and then how we provision that data for different customers, not only internal, but BI tools, and how do you actually empower DSAI teams or data scientists across the board. So let's start by talking about who's Moderna. Probably some of you have heard of us, especially in the last couple of years. We make some vaccine there called Spikevax. But we are a Massachusetts-born company. We were founded more than 10 years ago with our only mission to deliver on the promise of mRNA science to create new generation of transformative medicines for patients. So we're basically focused on the patient. We are relying on the messenger RNA technology, which is not new, but we are discovering new ways to use it and to use it specifically to prevent illnesses and diseases. Since our founding in 2010, we have worked to build the industry's leading mRNA technology platform. So these are some of our numbers. Of course, we are now a commercial company, as I said before. We are in phase 3 with multiple studies like COVID boosters, the flu, RSV, CMV. We are in phase 2 with other programs like Zika, PCV, and VEGF. We are actually tackling a lot of respiratory illnesses, vaccines like COVID, older adults with RSV, the combination of flu plus COVID, and RSV, among others. We are working on 4 different therapeutic areas with 14 different medicines. So we have grown to be more than 3,400 employees now across the globe. So as you can see here, we are not only a COVID vaccine company. We are way more than that. So now that Praveen actually explained us how Amazon Data Exchange works, and Sunil educated us on real-world data, let's talk about how we actually use AWS Data Exchange in our world. So this is an oversimplified architecture of what we had before we enrolled with Amazon Data Exchange. So on the left side, as you can see, we have all the public data sources and private data sources. Of course, this is just a small subset of what we actually have. But in the Moderna landscape, we used to have to code and tailor every solution for every public and private data set. So for example, for the public data sets, we had to, for example, use scripting languages to tailor solutions to interact with the vendors, right? So we use Python, Julia, Node, among others. And then we deployed those solutions in other Amazon products like Fargate, maybe EC2 instances, you name it. But everything was super tailored to a very specific data source. With private data sources, it was even worse, because now we had to provide them a place where they can actually drop the data. In most of the cases, it was S3 buckets, but how do they access our S3 buckets? We have to put a facade that we like to call SFTP, of course, and then they can drop the data there, but it's not organized, there's no standardization. We actually have to go through all of them one by one to make sure that we get the data that we needed. So it became really, really painful to work with all of this. And of course, having all of that being so tailored meant that we needed to have a huge amount of ETL pipelines. So a lot of extraction from all these customized solutions, a big burden on the transformation itself, because now everything is not standard and we need to store this in Redshift. And Redshift, of course, as you know, is a regular columnar data warehouse. So very complicated, very cumbersome, a lot of work on the ETL pipelines. And again, once the data landed in Redshift, the sole purpose of having the data there is for us to empower our BI tools and teams across the company to unlock the power behind the data. So it became a challenge to get into all of this. So actually, it took us from 6 to 10 days to actually onboard one vendor, one single data source. And then on top of that, the time that we have to actually script the solution for all of this. Not efficient at all. And we are very efficient at Moderna. So we didn't like the solution. So let me walk you guys through the life cycle of a data set in our company. This is oversimplified, but let's talk about 4 different steps. Finding the right data set, evaluating the data set that meets the needs of our stakeholders, how we actually used to subscribe to this, and how we use the data. So first of all, finding the data was a nightmare, right? We had to go to hundreds of vendors, make sure that we have the data we needed, that we make sure they are not overlapping a lot of offers for the same data set. So we have to evaluate one by one, make sure that we get what we needed, a lot of viscosity, a lot of layers, not efficient at all, very time consuming. And on top of that, of course, all of them have different ways for us to access the data or deliver the data to us. So we have to do SFTP, as I said before, API integrations, S3, different flavors of relational databases, different clouds even, so very complicated. So that lead us to not have a unified data strategy as a company and as a team. That's very important for us. Then once we were able to overpass those obstacles and get to the subscription stage, of course, we have to build the ETL pipelines, right? Again, very complicated, not real-time data. We have to rely on how we get the data from the customers, not a standardization. It was a lot of data engineering time and resources just for the ETL process. And having all of these ETL processes scattered between different products in Amazon, different sources, different types, actually give us no option to catalog any of the products that we were acquiring. So very hard for us to actually have some kind of traceability on how we can see the data that we bought. And not only for us, but also for our stakeholders, right? They didn't know what we have, what can we offer. And internally as a team, very challenging for us to actually keep track of what we bought in a single place. Everything is scattered all over the place. And having those 3 steps being so complicated and time-consuming and inefficient make the usability of the data, which is the end goal of acquiring data, the last step very delayed and not useful for our consumers. So in most of the cases, we actually end up with a siloed data sets that we acquire. So basically, siloed data is not very useful. It is useful for maybe a handful of use cases, but honestly, when you want to really paint the picture of how the data started and how they ended, you need to add a lot of metadata to that, right? A lot of context. And you cannot do that with siloed data sets. So very, very, very inefficient as well. And then, of course, no way to trace who uses what. So security was a big thing for us as well. It keeps being a big thing for us. So we don't know who is using what data set, what tools were being used to access the data set. We were not really unblocking the power of data. We're just being a bottleneck for the processes that we had as a company for data acquisition. So we were happy. We got Amazon Data Exchange, AWS Data Exchange, or ADX. So now, as you can see on this, again, oversimplified architecture diagram, the Moderna landscape, it's reduced, right? And it's more organized and simpler. Still, the same data sources are on the left-hand side. You can see public and private sources again. They keep increasing exponentially on a daily basis for us. We keep acquiring multiple data sets. But now everything funnels through Amazon Data Exchange. It's a single point of entry. We don't have to go anywhere else, right? And then once the data comes through Amazon Data Exchange, it lands into our S3 buckets, which are basically our data lakes, and also lands into our data warehouse in Redshift. So the first thing for the data lakes, super important, right? Because on the Amazon Data Exchange platform, you can actually customize how do you want to partition the data, how do you want to organize your data in your data lakes, which clouds you want to put it into. So it's very easy to actually organize your data lake. And then on the Redshift side, it's a big win for us because we're using data share. So that means real-time data. We don't have to wait for anything. And that's what we want. We need the data immediately available for our consumers to make sure that they can make the educated decisions in their own teams, right? And of course, the organization of having these two, the data lake and the Redshift in the right place, empower all the analytics in our BI tools, data science team, and any other projects that we have as a company that relies on data. So let's go back to the 4 simple steps and oversimplified steps of the data lifecycle for us and how actually Amazon Data Exchange help us. So in the first step, finding AWS ADX, well, now we can identify the right partners very easily, right? We are removing viscosity because now we can connect our stakeholders directly to the person that is actually giving them the data. So the communication is a live communication between us and the data provider. So we are able to identify those right partners for the key projects. Of course, that means that we accelerated the acquisition process. Instead of taking us 8 to 10 days, now we reduce that by more than 50%. So in 3 days, we're able to identify the partner and get the data. Then now we can move faster to the evaluate space, to the evaluation of the data set itself. Through Amazon Data Exchange, we get the actual sample of the data. We are able to preview the data. Our stakeholders who actually know the data better than us, they can tell us that the data that we are going to acquire is the right one, is the data that they need. So that communication is excellent for us. We get all the data faster. The evaluation process is reduced almost by 70% of the time. Subscription, next step, that's the best with Amazon, with AWS ADX. Simple. You just, with a click of a button, you get the data you need, right? And that simplifies everything because now on the subscription, we don't have to think about any ETL processes. We don't have to think about how the data is going to get into us. We already know how it works. We already organize that through ADX. And of course, having everything funneled to one single platform gives us the ability to have clear traceability of what we have, not only for us as a team, but also for our stakeholders, which are the most important, right? We want to make sure that they know what data we have, avoid overlapping data sets. We don't want to be rebuying data sets that we already own. We want to make sure that we buy what we need, and it's the data that we actually need to keep growing. So having these 3 steps being so lean, now we get to the usability, which is what we want. We want to make sure that the usage of the data is where we focus the most. So we are empowering our users now to make educated decisions in a timely manner. There is no way for ETL processes, as I said before. It removed the viscosity of writing customized code, and we get now real-time data. We actually have the chance to sit with our partners through Amazon, through ADX, and make sure that we get the data in the format that we need beforehand. So we don't have to think about transformation and how are we going to load it or how are we going to extract the data. We actually have a live communication with our vendors where we say we want the data in this format with these data types, and it needs to land in this format, in this file format, file naming conventions, you name it. We can customize all of that. And that makes our life super easy for the usability of the data. And now that everything flows through ADX, we have an organized data lakes across the board because we can decide on partitioning and how we organize those files in the cloud. And of course, our data warehouses, they look more organized, right? Our data is structured, we know what to expect, data types are standard, so there is no ETL process in the middle. That's a big win for us. Apart from all of this, of course, this helps us a lot in other processes, especially on the legal and finance and all the procurement boilerplate that we had to go through before, because now everything flows through AWS ADX. It's simple. It goes straight forward to where it needs to go, comes from the right budget, and gets to the vendor. There is no boilerplate in the middle. So we get everything that we need in a single platform. We started all of this with the first project and empowered the people with real-world data for our epidemiologists in the clinical space. But of course, now that we have this reliability on the data is so accurate and gets to their hands in a timely manner that actually help us spread the word across the company, and now we have more teams approaching us because they want that data in the same way. So it helps us tailor now only one thing, our data strategy, right? Now our data strategy is centered with AWS Data Exchange. That's how we decide it's going to go for the company. Of course, we know it's not going to fit the bill for 100% of the use cases, but we know this is the right way to go for all of our vendors. And actually, even empower us to onboard new vendors. People that don't even know that Amazon Data Exchange existed, right? They don't even know the platform. So we are able to now talk to them, bring them on board, and now they can not only sell the data to Moderna, but they can sell the data to everybody else. So it's a big win for everybody involved in the process. So teams across the company have been now approaching us with more requests, like commercial teams, the finance. We are, of course, expanding in the real-world data platforms with the flu, RSV. We're doing a lot of global surveillance with that, and we know there are more projects to come. So, of course, what do we do with the data? We have a super talented team that designs all these beautiful dashboards, and they're actually focused on examples like this one. This is for real-world evidence data for RSV. This helps our teams make educated decisions in a timely manner. They are fully empowered to use the data they bought, the data they chose, to actually go into their meetings with their teams and decide based on that data. The data is flowing live, so they don't have to wait for anything. So it actually empowers them. And as I said before, not only the clinical space is getting a lot of traction, but a lot of other teams are getting traction, like commercial. So for example, now we are able to track stuff like this, like the Fall 22 campaign tracking metrics or market execution. All of this is coming from our public websites. So we have partners that we have been able to identify through Amazon Data Exchange that can actually do the web scraping for us. So we are not only enable other partners to get into the platform, but now with the help of our partners, we don't have to track live if the data source is failing, if a new table it's not live, or if a new column is added. Basically, we have established this partnership with our vendors where the data, information, and the quality of the data makes us more preventive than reactive, right? So we know what is happening. We know what is happening ahead of time. So our end customer or end consumer across the organization doesn't call us for errors. We know ahead of time how to fix it. We are informed by our partners who help us to catalog and keep track of all of this across the board. So we know that we are just scratching the surface with Amazon Data Exchange. We know there are more projects to come, but we are excited to keep this partnership going. Of course, the two new announcements make very interesting and appealing for us. So we are ready to keep growing with ADX. So I give it back to you, Praveen. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. That was a great session, Carlos and also Sunil. Really excited to hear about all the great work that Moderna and Takeda are doing on real-world data to accelerate drug development and the launches. Thank you again for this partnership. We look forward to continue the innovation with you and further reducing the friction in your real-world data discovery and access across the globe. So what that means for all of us to get this started. So AWS Data Exchange will partner with your business users, including epidemiologists and medical affairs, to find fit-for-purpose data sets that you're looking for, as Sunil mentioned. We will also work with your data engineers, where Data Exchange can streamline the data pipeline across different sources, and you have a central catalog with all your RWD subscription, minimizing some of the duplicate subscription issues that Sunil and Carlos mentioned. And from a procurement management or your procurement team, we can consolidate your data purchases and the entitlement across the data providers, including all the data subscription agreement with them. And anytime you have a commercial billing with the data providers, it will attribute it towards your spend commitment with AWS, if you will. We thank you again for being part of this session. We've got a QR code if you have any questions on Data Exchange, how to get started. The QR code will get you started. We'll be here for a few more minutes to answer any question, but otherwise, thank you again for joining this session. Thank you.